So I'm going to just give you a little bit of notes on lesson 6 because there's a few things in here I could see that may cause problems. But we're looking at multiplying integers, and an integer is really just a number, like a whole number, like 3, 9. Doesn't include fractions and those kind of things, but it also includes negative numbers. And then with that, there's some problems with the proper sign when you're multiplying. So when you're multiplying integers, that's just saying, 3 times something, right? So there's different ways you can write it. It can be 3 with an x, 3 times 3, or it can be 3.3 or 3. It's the same as 3 times 3, or it can just be a 3 and then brackets and a 3. These are all 3 times 3, 3 times 3, or 3 times 3. And they're all equal to 9. This is 9, right? This is 9, and this is 9. Okay, you can also have, with this, you can also have letters in here. So we could say 3 times n, or 3 dot n, right? Or we could say 3n. Now, we don't know what n is. Sometimes we can solve for it, but we're going to, not there yet. We're going to get there. But the answer to these are all the same. 3n, 3n, and 3n. Okay. No matter how you look at these. So I think in your homework, it's going to be doing this style. It's going to get rid of the x. So be aware of that. And the one main thing I wanted to show you are the rules for multiplication. You just got to remember them. It is whenever you have a positive, you times it by another positive, the end answer will be positive. So if we did 8 times 7, we know that's 56. And then we know it's positive because it's 2 positives. And then we have a positive times a negative. That's always going to be a negative. So if we had 7 times negative 8, it would still be 56. But because it's positive times a negative, it's a negative. And then if you have 2 negatives, negative times a negative, that ends up with a positive. So we'll just put the positive in right away. I think this is usually pretty straightforward. Just remember when you're multiplying two things together, the same sign, they're always going to be positive. When you're multiplying things together and they have different signs, they're always going to be negative. I think the problem, though, comes in when you have something like this. Let me show you one of these. 2. Okay, so what is this equal to, right? So you have multiple signs. How do you figure out what the sign for this would be? Really, you just go with the sign as it is. You just work your way across, from left to right. So you have, this is a positive times a negative, that's a negative. Then a negative times a negative is a positive. Then a positive times a positive, same sign as positive. Then this ends up, in the end, it's going to be negative. So sometimes if you have a bunch of these numbers, you can figure out what the sign is first, put it in, and then figure out the answer, right? So again, positive times a negative, so we labeled this. This would be a negative. Then a negative times a negative, positive. Then positive times a positive, still positive. And then a positive times a negative. In the end, the answer is going to be negative. And so 3 times 5 is 15. 15 times 3 is 45. 45 times 4 is 180. Then 180 times 2 is 360. And we figured out the sign. So it's negative 360. So you just work your way across, figure out the sign, and then do the multiplication. I think that's all you need. I don't think it's going to give you anything like this, but I wanted to include this just to introduce you to it and be aware that this is probably going to happen eventually. Usually like 3 numbers. I really went crazy with this one with 5. But really 3 is probably the most you're going to see. That's the notes. Let me know if you have any questions. You should be able to easily do lesson 6.